The bracelet hit the table before she even sat down. 7 small beads, hand-carved, darkened from years of touch. They scattered slightly against the glass surface, the sound barely louder than a breath. Amara Okoye Park stood in the center of the living room, still wearing her coat, still holding herself like someone who had rehearsed this moment many times in the bathroom mirror at 2 in the morning. Jae-Min looked up from his laptop. He looked at the beads. He looked at her. "What is this?" he said. "Pick it up," Amara said. "I want you to hold it." He didn't move immediately. There was a long pause, the kind of pause that used to mean something between them, the kind that used to mean he was thinking carefully before speaking. Now she understood it differently. Now she knew it meant he was calculating how quickly he could return to whatever he had been doing. He picked up the bracelet. It coiled in his palm like something tired. "Each bead," Amara said, her voice very even, "is a mistake I chose to forgive. There are 7 beads, Jae-Min, 7 things that should have ended us. When the last bead is gone," she paused, "I'll be gone too." He stared at her for a moment. A thin smile crossed his face, the smile she had learned to hate. The one that meant she was being theatrical. The one that meant he found her exhausting. "Amara," he said, setting the bracelet down, "it's late." She nodded once. She picked up her coat from where it had begun to slip off her arm. She walked to the bedroom. She did not cry. She had already done all of that. That is the question that should be sitting inside you right now. What were the 7 things? What broke this woman bead by bead, quietly, over 3 years, until she stood in a designer apartment in Seoul counting down to her own disappearance? Stay with us, because this story does not end where you think it ends. Seoul, 3 years earlier. The wedding photographs were beautiful. Anyone looking at them would have thought so. Amara in white and gold, her skin luminous, laughing at something Jae-Min had whispered. Jae-Min looking at her in that photograph, the way men look at things they have just won. Their families on either side, the Nigerian aunties dramatic in their agbatas, the Korean relatives precise and careful in their formality, and somehow these 2 people at the center making it all cohere. Jae-Min Park was, by any measure, an exceptional man. His name appeared in legal journals. His firm took the cases that made other firms nervous. He wore the kind of confidence that came not from arrogance alone, but from a long record of being correct. In Seoul's legal world, they called him the Iron Verdict. Judges respected him. Opponents feared him. Clients paid absurd retainers just to have his name on their paperwork. What Seoul's legal world did not know was that the woman he went home to every evening had once been something equal and possibly greater. Amara had given that up. Quietly, without announcement, without negotiation, she had stepped away from a career that had made powerful men uncomfortable in 4 countries. International litigation, corporate law that crossed borders, cases that ran for years and turned on arguments of such precision that opposing lawyers sometimes asked her privately afterward how she had seen what they had missed. She had been called, in certain circles, the Midnight Advocate, because she never seemed to sleep and her briefs arrived just before dawn, immaculate, devastating. She married Jae-Min and moved to Seoul, and she became a housewife. People assumed this was surrender. People in Seoul especially, who watched her sitting quietly at dinner parties while the lawyers talked over each other, who saw her smile politely at jokes she could have dismantled with 2 sentences, who assumed that a Nigerian woman in a Korean lawyer's apartment had arrived there through luck or beauty or need. Amara watched them make these assumptions, and she said nothing. She had been raised by a woman who said that silence was its own kind of armor, and she had worn it all her life. What people didn't see was what she had given up, and why. She had loved Jae-Min the way you love someone whose flaws you understand and choose anyway. She had known he was self-contained. She had known he put his work before almost everything. She had thought, in the optimistic arithmetic of early love, that she would be the exception. That love would make her different from his caseload, that he would see what she was choosing and understand the weight of it. He never asked her to stop working. He never told her to. He simply never once asked how she felt about leaving it behind. This is the thing about neglect that people misunderstand. It is rarely cruel. It is mostly just absent. It is a man who does not ask, a man who does not notice, A man who comes home and eats the food and sleeps in the bed and says all the correct things and is never, not once, actually present. It is a woman counting the days by small surrenders. And when she runs out of ways to count, she picks up 7 beads. The divorce announcement came on a Wednesday. Jae-Min said it the way he said most difficult things, cleanly, without decoration, as if he were reading a verdict. "I think we should end the marriage," he said. "I don't think we've been happy for a long time. We're very different people." Amara looked at him. She was sitting at the kitchen island, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. She did not spill it. She did not raise her voice. She said very quietly, "All right." He blinked. He had expected something. An argument, perhaps, or tears, or the particular brand of wounded accusation that divorce conversations usually produced. He had prepared himself. He had nothing to prepare himself against. "All right," he repeated. "I said all right, Jae-Min. Let's end it properly." The calmness unnerved him. He told himself it was pride. He told himself it was the stubbornness he had always found both admirable and frustrating about her. He opened his laptop. He went back to work. The moment passed. 3 days later, Hanaseo returned to Seoul. If Jae-Min was the kind of man who collected admirers, Hana was the kind of woman who collected regrets in other people. She was a concert pianist, genuinely brilliant, the sort of talent that arrives so fully formed it seems unfair to everyone who worked harder. She and Jae-Min had been together at university, before careers pulled them in separate directions, and before the world started attaching different names to who they were. She had spent years in Vienna and Paris. She had married a man who turned out to be many things she had not anticipated. Now she was home, her marriage collapsing quietly behind her, and she needed the best lawyer in Seoul. She called Jae-Min on a Thursday afternoon. By Friday morning, she was sitting across from him in his office, and by the look on his face, calm, controlled, but with something alive underneath it that had not been there in years. Amara understood everything she needed to understand. She did not say a word. She went home. She began preparing the divorce documents herself, filing through the procedural requirements with the quiet efficiency of someone who had spent years knowing exactly how these things worked. She removed the second bead from her bracelet and set it on the bathroom shelf. The legal world began to whisper in the 3rd week of Amara's silence. The whispers were about a lawyer, not about her. They were about someone returning, someone whose name came up in certain conversations the way old war stories come up, with a mixture of respect and relief that the war was over. The Midnight Advocate. People said she had retired. People said she had gone abroad. Nobody said she was living in a 4-bedroom apartment in Gangnam, waking at 5 in the morning to read case files while her husband slept, keeping her mind sharp out of habit, out of necessity, out of the private and fierce refusal to let herself become only what she appeared to be. Jae-Min noticed that Amara was out more. He assumed she had found a hobby. He did not ask. She was not at a pottery class. She was meeting with Kim Soo-hyun, a former colleague now running one of Seoul's most respected corporate law practices, who had been trying to bring her back for 2 years. She was reviewing files on a case so large and so tangled that most firms had already declined it. She was doing what she had always done, taking the impossible case, because the impossible case was the one that proved what you were made of. She told Kim Soo-hyun she would appear in court only once. She would not be on the letterhead. She would not be interviewed. She would win the case and she would walk away, and that would be the end of it. Kim Soo-hyun asked why. Amara said, simply, "Because I need to remember who I am before I leave." The day of the hearing was a Tuesday. The courtroom was full in the way that courtrooms are full when something important is expected. Jae-Min was in a different courtroom that morning, cross-examining a witness in the Hana-Seo divorce case. He was focused. He was excellent. He was completely unaware that in a building 4 blocks away, the legal community of Seoul was about to receive a shock it would not recover from quickly. The opposing counsel was a senior partner from a firm with a European parent company, a man who had been practicing for 25 years and who had never seen this woman before. He expected a junior associate. He had been told the opposing team was sending a last-minute substitute. Amara walked in wearing a charcoal suit that had lived in the back of a wardrobe for 3 years. She sat down. She arranged her papers. She looked, briefly, at the gallery, at the senior partners from 5 different firms who had come to watch out of curiosity or nostalgia, and she allowed herself exactly 1 second of something that was not quite a smile. Then the session began. What happened in the next 4 hours was later described, in one legal journal, as watching someone take apart a very expensive machine with a household screwdriver. Every argument opposing counsel raised, Amara anticipated. Every precedent he cited, she had already addressed in the written brief submitted that morning. She spoke without notes for 30 minutes at one point, walking the judge through a sequence of corporate law reasoning so layered and precise that 2 of the gallery lawyers quietly took out notebooks and began writing things down. When it was over, she won. By that evening, the legal community had one conversation. The midnight advocate had returned, and she was Jae-Min Park's wife. Jae-Min found out from a colleague who sent a news alert to his phone at 6:15. He sat with his phone for a very long time in his car in the parking structure beneath his office building. He read the article twice. He looked at the photograph, Amara walking out of the courthouse, not looking at the cameras, her face carrying that expression he had always read as indifference and was now being forced, very urgently, to reread. He drove home. She wasn't there. He sat in the living room and he looked at the bracelet still on the table where he had set it down. 6 beads. One had come off while he held it, or had she removed it? He could not remember touching it again. He thought about the first year of their marriage. Amara helping him prepare for a corporate trial, not as a lawyer, just as someone listening, asking questions, and somehow, he had not understood it at the time. The questions were always the ones that exposed the weakness in his argument. He had won that trial. He had taken the credit. He had not thought once to wonder how much of it belonged to her. He thought about the dinner party where a senior judge had asked Amara what she did, and she had said, quietly, "I look after our home." And the judge had said, "What a waste." And Jae-Min had changed the subject because the comment made him uncomfortable in a way he had never fully examined. He thought about Lagos, her mother calling. Amara on the phone, laughing in Yoruba with a brightness she never quite accessed in Seoul, a warmth she kept folded up somewhere he had not known to look for. He thought about all of this for the first time, sitting in the silent apartment with the bracelet on the table, and what he felt was not grief exactly and not guilt exactly, but something larger than both, the particular weight of understanding arriving too late. Seoul was not gentle with him in the days that followed. The news cycle ran the story in 3 different directions. The human interest angle, legendary lawyer hiding as housewife. The legal angle, corporate case won against long odds. And the personal angle, which was the one that sold best, did Jae-Min Park abandon a genius to chase his first love? Reporters gathered outside the firm. His junior associates were approached. A gossip site ran a piece headlined with a question about whether the iron verdict had made the one ruling he couldn't appeal. Jae-Min gave no comment. He went to work. He came home. Amara was rarely there, and when she was, she moved through the apartment with a quietness that had shifted in quality. It no longer felt like patience. It felt like completion. He called her on a Thursday night when she hadn't come home by 10. "Where are you?" "Working," she said. "We should talk." A silence. "When?" "Now, tomorrow, whenever you're." "I'm busy, Jae-Min." "Amara." But she had already ended the call. He was waiting outside the courthouse when she emerged on a Friday afternoon. She saw him before he saw her, and she did not slow down. She walked toward him at the same pace, unhurried, with the same expression she had carried since the Tuesday that changed everything, and she stopped 2 feet away and waited. "I was wrong," he said. She looked at him. "I was wrong about everything," he said. "About who you were, about what you gave up, about what we had." His voice was controlled, but under the control there was something that had not been there in years, something real. "I know I don't have the right to say any of this now. I know the timing is terrible," Amara said quietly. "Yes," he looked at her. "I was afraid of you." She went still. Not of you, he said, correcting himself. Of what you were, of what it meant. I told myself I was proud of you, I told myself I supported whatever you chose, but I never once asked you what you were choosing. I never once asked if it was making you happy, because I think I knew the answer and I didn't want to know. He exhaled. I spent 3 years in a marriage with someone I never tried to understand. Amara looked at him for a long moment. The street moved around them, taxis and voices, and the particular density of a Seoul evening, indifferent to everything small and human happening on the pavement. Why are you telling me this? She said. Because I don't want to lose you. You already did, she said, and her voice was not unkind. Jae-Min, you lost me one beat at a time. Over years, there was no single moment. That's the part you still don't understand. You're looking for the thing you did wrong so you can apologize for it and fix it. But it wasn't one thing. It was every morning you didn't ask. Every evening you didn't see. Every time you came home and I was there and you looked through me instead of at me. She opened her bag. She took out the bracelet. One bead remained. He stared at it. I forgave you every time, she said. That's what these were, not anger, not punishment, forgiveness. I kept choosing to forgive you and stay bead by bead because I believed you would eventually. She stopped. It doesn't matter now what I believed. She held the bracelet over his open hand and placed the last bead into it. It was very small. It sat in his palm like something irreplaceable. Do you still love me? He said. His voice was very quiet. She looked at him for a long time. Long enough that he felt, briefly, the terrible possibility of hope. I loved you enough to let you go, she said. She walked away. He stood on the pavement with a broken bracelet in his palm and the specific weight of a verdict he had delivered against himself. Months passed. Seoul moved forward as Seoul does, without sentiment, without pause. Jae-Min Park won several high-profile cases. His reputation recovered mostly. He sat alone in the apartment that now felt architecturally different, the rooms somehow larger and emptier in a way that had nothing to do with furniture. He kept the bracelet in his desk drawer. He did not know why. He opened the drawer sometimes and looked at it and then closed the drawer and went back to work. He read about her occasionally. International arbitration cases, a landmark corporate dispute resolved in Lagos, an interview in a legal journal where she was asked what had brought her back to practice, and she said simply, I remembered that some things are worth protecting, including yourself. He watched her board a flight to Lagos one evening at Incheon, not because he followed her, but because they were in the same terminal, both traveling, and for a moment their eyes met across the departures hall. She looked well. She looked like herself, the self he had never understood he was living beside until it was standing across an airport departure hall, pulling a carry-on, moving toward a different gate. She nodded at him, once. The nod of someone who has forgiven without forgetting, who has moved forward without pretending the past was light. He nodded back. She turned away. The man who had never lost a case stood alone in the departures hall with a broken bracelet in his pocket and understood, completely and too late, that some verdicts cannot be appealed. Some debts are not paid in courtrooms. Some people carry your name longer than you deserved it. And some regrets arrive not like a sentence, but like a question, quiet, persistent, returning every time a drawer opens or a flight departs or a woman walks away at the pace of someone who knows exactly where she is going. What would you have done differently? If you were Jae-Min, at what bead would you have woken up? If you were Amara, would you have placed that last bead in his hand or kept it? Leave your answer in the comments. We read every one. If this story moved you, if you felt something in that courtroom, on that pavement, in that airport departure hall, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Hit the like button. It helps more people find stories like this one. And if you're new here and you stayed all the way to this moment, subscribe. Every week we bring you stories that don't just entertain. They ask you something real about who you are and what you're willing to give and what you're willing to let go. The Midnight Advocate has left the building. But the question she left behind, that one stays.